Are kids who are adopted rejects? Coming right up. Are kids who are adopted rejects? Are you a reject if you were adopted? I think everyone I've ever met who's been adopted has had to deal with this issue of feeling like you were rejected by your parents. So it's a valid question. Are you rejects? In the Bible, Paul mentions 5 times that we've been adopted by God or received a spirit of adoption. And I know for me, growing up reading that, I would think, well, that sounds second best. It's talking about God adopting me. I kind of thought the biological kids are the best ones, which in Paul's argument, he's talking about the Jews were kind of the firstborn and the first chosen ones by God. And then we're kind of like the second best. And that's how I always felt. If it's talking about adoption, I kind of had the notion that parents love their biological children a lot, and then parents love their adopted children almost as much. When I thought about God adopted you, I felt like that meant you're second best. You're God's next best, and it's not a very good feeling. So I want to dive into what Paul actually says about this and what the Bible actually says about this. This is what he says in Romans 8:15. You have not received a spirit of slavery leading to fear again, but you have received a spirit of adoption as sons, by which we cry out, Abba, Father. So he's saying we're adopted and we cry out to God. But what's God's response? Is God looking at us as his next best, as second rate? To get the answer to this, and this is amazing, and I want you guys to get this, especially if you're adopted, but for everyone, you have to look at the world in which Paul was talking about adoption. In the Roman Empire, there was something about adoption that was completely different, and this is it. 9 of the first 11 emperors in the first 200 years of the Roman Empire, the Caesars, the emperors, 9 of the first 11 were adopted. Now, what was going on? Why were so many adopted? The emperor would want someone who was the top of the class, someone who was the best of the best, that he could adopt to give his entire kingdom to. And so what was happening a lot of the times is the biological kids were deemed not special enough, not smart enough, not charismatic enough by the emperor. And so he would go find the best of the best and adopt them. And so the adoptees were the chosen ones to inherit the entire kingdom, the entire empire. And so it totally flips the concept of adoption on its head. In that context, the biological children were the rejected ones, were the ones that were passed over, and the adopted ones were the chosen, selected ones. Let me just read to you a list of all of the famous emperors that were actually adopted. Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Nero, Trajan, Hadrian, and Antonius, I don't know, forgive me on the pronunciation, Antoninus Pius, Marcus Aurelius, Lucius Verus. All of these became emperor through adoption. The ones that were adopted were the best and the brightest. They were the treasured possession of the emperor to inherit everything. Paul says in Ephesians, he said, God decided in advance to adopt us into his own family by bringing us to himself through Jesus Christ. This is what he wanted to do, and it gave him great pleasure. So for those of us that have been adopted by God, we've been chosen by God, and it gives him great pleasure. For those that were adopted in the natural by parents, you were chosen. Do you realize that? You were chosen. Whatever the details, however it all worked out with finances and different agencies and all those things, you were chosen. And so every time you get any notion of feeling rejected, I want you to think about the Roman Empire, the system that's set up, and how the emperors adopted and chose this one because they wanted to give this child everything. They wanted to give them the kingdom. So in conclusion, if you were adopted, you were chosen. If you were adopted by God, it's because he chose you. If you were adopted by a family, it's because you were the chosen ones. And if you don't know God, if you have no idea who God is, God wants to adopt you. If you like this video, if it blessed you, leave me a comment down below. Let me know about your experience with feeling rejected by God and how you overcame that. I would love to hear from you. And if you know someone who's been naturally adopted, please send them this video. I would love to get this message out that they're not rejects, they're chosen. See you guys next week.